Welcome to our deep dive on the paradox of persistent migration and why travel restrictions often fail to stop human movement. In this video, we will explore the structural forces behind migration, how push and pull factors interact, and why policy tightening frequently redirects rather than deters people. We will also consider the role of diaspora networks and discuss policy options that address the root causes. Stay with us as we unpack complex dynamics through visuals, diagrams, and clear explanations. Here is today's agenda. First, we set the context. Next, we break down the risk calculus behind persistent migration. Then, we examine diaspora networks as a multiplier. After that, we look at rerouting effects and unintended consequences. We will also use several diagram types to visualize the dynamics. Finally, we outline policy pathways, take a couple of quick quizzes, and close with key takeaways. Before we proceed, a quick disclaimer. This video provides general information for educational purposes and does not constitute legal advice. It does not encourage or endorse irregular migration. Anyone considering international movement should consult qualified legal and safety professionals and follow the law. To set the stage, we need to differentiate perception from reality. Despite tighter borders, people experiencing extreme instability still move toward destinations perceived as safe and stable. This persistence suggests that the dominant driver is necessity, not preference. We will analyze how this plays out in practice. First, let's examine the risk calculus. For people facing conflict, ecological disaster, or political collapse, the known threats at home outweigh the penalties or risks of violating a restriction. This means that policy risk becomes negligible in comparison to existential risk. As a result, tightening rules often changes the route rather than the decision to move. Legal barriers can transform intended legal pathways into irregular and potentially dangerous ones. The flowchart visualizes this decision tree. Individuals assess risk, check if legal paths are open, and if not, consider irregular routes, which increases exposure to smugglers and trafficking. Upon arrival, diaspora support can improve stability and integration outcomes. Next, here is a concise snapshot using Markdown-style emphasis to reinforce key points. The core idea is that migration is driven by necessity rather than preference. Policy acts as a gate, while push factors are the pressure behind the gate. Push factors include conflict, ecological shocks, and state failure. Pull factors include safety, rule of law, diaspora support, and essential services. The net effect is that flows persist until root causes are addressed. This will frame our subsequent sections. Moving on, diaspora networks act as a multiplier. Established communities reduce resettlement friction by providing information, financial help, housing, and cultural anchoring. This social capital lowers the cost and complexity of integration. Therefore, even when laws tighten, these networks sustain flows by offering practical support that mitigates the risks and uncertainties of relocation. Now consider the rerouting effect. Restrictions frequently redirect flows into informal and higher-risk channels. This raises the role and profitability of trafficking networks and smuggling intermediaries. Meanwhile, diaspora connections continue to provide support, which can still enable eventual integration after arrival. The sequence diagram illustrates how a rejected legal attempt can pivot to irregular routes, with smugglers facilitating movement and diaspora members assisting with information, funding, and post-arrival lodging. Here is a table that summarizes the interaction between push factors, pull factors, and policy effects. Push factors include conflict, disaster, and governance collapse, which create a compulsion to move. Pull factors include safety, rule of law, services, and diaspora support, which reduce friction through networks. The policy effect functions as gatekeeping and rerouting. In the short term, it blocks legal paths and raises irregular risks. Over the long term, policies often shift routes rather than reducing underlying demand. Let's compare two broad strategies. Restrictions can send an immediate signal of control and may reduce legal entries, but they often increase irregular routes and inadvertently strengthen trafficking networks. By contrast, investing in root cause action addresses insecurity, governance collapse, and economic failure in origin countries. This approach reduces push pressures over time, complements lawful pathways, and decreases incentives for smuggling. Next, let's outline practical policy pathways. First, stabilize source regions by improving safety, restoring basic services, and building climate resilience. Second, Expand lawful pathways through family reunification, labor visas, and humanitarian channels. Third, partner with diaspora communities to provide accurate information, match remittances for development, and mentor newcomers. Fourth, target smuggling networks with coordinated enforcement while protecting victims. Fifth, invest in data sharing and early warning systems to anticipate surges and protect lives. Finally, develop regional compacts so neighboring states share responsibility and coordinate solutions. To visualize relative influences, consider this illustrative pie chart. In crisis contexts, push pressures tend to dominate, often determining the decision to move. Pull factors remain meaningful, especially through diaspora support, but they are generally secondary when compared to survival imperatives. Deterrence usually plays a marginal role when weighed against existential threats. Quiz time. Which factor most explains why restrictions often fail to halt migration flows from crisis regions? Option A. Travelers prefer adventure and novelty. Option B. Push factors overshadow policy risks for people facing existential threats. Option C. Policy messages are not communicated effectively. Option D. Border infrastructure is always outdated. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is B. When survival is at stake, push factors overshadow policy risks. People weigh the certainty of danger at home against the uncertain penalties of attempting to move, which is why restrictions often fail to halt movement. Second quiz. What role do diaspora networks primarily play in persistent migration? Option A. They create push factors in origin countries. Option B. They eliminate the need for legal pathways. Option C. They reduce resettlement friction by providing support and information. Option D. They directly control border policy. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is C. Diaspora networks provide social capital, including funding, housing, and guidance. This reduces resettlement friction and supports integration, helping sustain flows even when legal barriers increase. Here are the key takeaways. First, necessity tends to beat deterrence in crisis contexts. Second, policies often reroute rather than reduce flows. Third, diaspora networks sustain movement and integration. Fourth, combining root cause action with lawful pathways is the most effective approach. Finally, protecting lives requires better data, regional cooperation, and targeted anti-trafficking measures. To summarize, migration persists when push factors overwhelm policy risks. Diaspora networks provide the social infrastructure that makes movement and integration more feasible. Restrictions that lack complementary root cause strategies can inadvertently empower trafficking networks. A balanced approach emphasizes stabilizing source regions, expanding lawful channels, and strengthening cooperation to protect lives and communities. Thank you for watching. If this video clarified the paradox of persistent migration, please like, share, and subscribe. We would love to hear your insights and experiences in the comments. Until next time.